Welcome back to Panther Extra. We have Paul Oren from the Victory Bell joining us to break down the season opener for UNI as they take on or they host Valparaiso in the UNI-Dome. It's the season opener for the Beacons as well. Before we get to that, Paul, how are you doing today?
Look, things are great. It's late June. There's not a lot going on, so the fact that I can sit here and talk football with you is fantastic. I really appreciate this. And again, I just think that this is a fun time because, as will say later on, everybody's optimistic right now in all sports. Valpo hasn't lost a game in the 24-25 season in anything. And so there's just good optimism. So I'm great right now.
That's what we like to hear. And with that, what is the what's the momentum coming out of the 2023 season? What happened in the 2023 season for the Beacons? Take us through the state of the program coming out of last season. If it's all optimism, where's that coming from?
Well, first of all, let me just do a little bit of an introduction to Northern Iowa fans about Valpo football
All
because
right.
Northern Iowa fans know Valpo as a member of the Missouri Valley Conference.
Hmm.
And in that, Valpo has been known to probably have for basketball some of the weakest facilities, but a proud tradition in the Missouri Valley Conference for basketball. Or the school has got a proud tradition. They haven't quite turned the corner in the Valley yet, but Valpo has been a basketball school through and through. Valpo also had a very good run through the conference last year in women's soccer, winning and going to the NCAA tournament. Valpo's been competitive in a lot of sports. Football is a different animal at Valpo.
Hmm.
It's a Division 1 program because if you got to be Division 1 in one school in one sport, you're Division 1 in everything. But what Valpo is that's different than UNI and a lot of other schools out there is Valpo is a non-scholarship Division 1 program.
Hmm.
So uh, asking what a year to year is like for a non-scholarship program is hard because if you're good as a freshman, chances are you're getting snapped up by
Hmm.
somebody else, and there's not a lot of continuity there. That said, there is some continuity this year with Valpo, but it is a completely different landscape, football at Valpo, than it is any other sport, right? They've got different, problems, obstacles, things like that. All that being said, looking back at the season from last year, 2023, Valpo went 3-8, but they won two of their last three games against some good competition in the PFL. They had a lot of injuries, Ethan, a lot of injuries.
Okay.
Lost one of their captains in the first game of the year. He ripped his bicep off his arm, essentially. He was a starting
Yikes.
center.
Yikes.
That's hard.
Yikes. Yeah.
Starting quarterback, who they're very high on, goes into Drake and breaks his collarbone. Probably partially because there were injuries at the offensive line. And so then there was, people were getting to the quarterback. There were just a lot of injuries. And there were a couple of soul crushing losses early in the season, four game losing streak, in which three of those games were really close, including, going down to Butler, which around Valpo, they call that the school down south. There's a good rivalry with Butler. They play for something called the Hoosier Helmet. Valpo had it the year before. They lost it this year. Actually, they've lost the last 2 years. They lost on a last second play at home 2 years ago. And so you can go 1-11 or 1-10 at Valpo, but if that one is beating Butler, you had a good year. Valpo went 3-8 and they lost to Butler. It was a bad year. But they closed out with wins against Dayton and Stetson. Then they went to St. Thomas, a team that Northern Iowa will play in week 2 this year. And it was a close loss, but it was a lot closer than expected. So 3-8, record wise, not great. Bill Parcells always says you are what your record says you are, but I do think there's some optimism.
Okay, and in that 3 game losing streak to start the season before they beat Southwest Minnesota State, two-point loss to Indiana Wesleyan, which I have to plug because that's where my wife went to college. Indiana Wesleyan, the NAIA program in Marion, Indiana. So I guess looking at how they were able to come out of that, is it the optimism from who they're bringing back and just the health that they're getting, or what is the biggest cause for the optimism if you could put your finger on it?
Well, first of all, I just want to say one thing. That Indiana Wesleyan game, I was at that game and it was insane. A very, very tight game. Valpo's quarterback threw 5 interceptions in that game, and they still had the ball with a chance. So they had a 2-point conversion that went awry. Look, the optimism is this: they closed out the year strong, wins against Dayton and Stetson, and then a really, really tight loss to St. Thomas. Like I said at the top, everyone's optimistic this time of year. I don't know that anyone's ever in June going into a season, or July or August for that matter, going into a season and saying, we're going to be bad, especially in this non-scholarship landscape where things kind of change all the time. And not only that, but in this landscape of transfers that we just don't know who's going to be good or who's going to be bad on a year-to-year basis. We can look at basketball, we can look at football, all of that. So I do think there's optimism, and I think getting healthy is important. I think getting Mikey Apple Jr. back as the quarterback is important, but there's also a chance he might not even be the starting quarterback, which I'm sure we'll touch on in a little bit. But getting a full complement of health back, I think, is important. But Ethan, it's a 100% injury rate in the game of football, so you know there's going to be injuries. So we'll see what's going to happen. But going in, yes, there will be optimism. Valpo starts with 2 horrifically hard games. But those games, I think, will help set up for that rematch home opener against Indiana Wesleyan, 6:30 under the lights. Can't ask for anything better than nighttime football in Valpo. And then they got a game against Roosevelt, and then they get into conference play. And I do think that Valpo's optimistic going into conference play this year.
So taking that and transitioning into expectations, I asked if you could come up with a best case and worst case scenario. This is something I'm gonna ask all of the beat reporters that I talked to for this podcast series. Let's start with the best case scenario. It doesn't necessarily need to be, you don't need to put a record number on it, but what does the best case scenario season look like for Valparaiso this year?
Easy. Best case scenario for Valpo is they shore up the offensive line, and they do a great job with that, and they protect the quarterback, and they establish a run game. Last year, they struggled doing that. The offensive line really was a struggle. And from in that, their leading running back at 510 rushing yards, and their quarterback went out with a broken collarbone. Their backup quarterback that came in broke a finger, and he was out. They had 3 quarterbacks. Now, also, best case scenario is you've got Mikey Apple Jr., who went into last year as the starter, got hurt. And then Rowan Keefe, a young guy that they really like, they're very high on, he came in, dropped a couple of 60-yard bomb touchdowns at Davidson, and he closed out the season pretty well. You've got these 2 guys now who are going to battle each other. And you have a redshirt freshman, Karan Tyler from California, who did some good. They got a package of plays for. He's a bit of a different kind of athlete. And you got to establish a quarterback. I think you have to establish a quarterback. Look, I'm not a coach. I'm excited for NCAA football 25 to come out because that's where I get to make decisions. But they say if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. I don't know if that's just something that idiots in the media say, like, when coaches say dumb stuff, like it's hard to beat a team 3 times. It's not hard to beat a team 3 times. You beat them twice, beat them again. Like, we just say things that sound cute and we try to be intelligent. If you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. I don't know. Maybe if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have, I don't know, 2 quarterbacks. And so they've got a couple of quarterbacks, and we'll see who becomes the best one. But I guess best case scenario is you find one and you roll with him and he gets some consistency going. But that starts, Ethan, with the offensive line. If Valpo can shore up the offensive line, that's the best case scenario. Valpo should win more often than not in conference or be in the games. Then it's football. You don't know how the ball's going to bounce, but that's what I would say.
I think if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. It's more applicable to the NFL than anything because at that point you don't know if one of them's a franchise guy or not
Yeah,
because
no, I
you can't
agree.
tell. I definitely don't think it applies in college football. And the case study there is Alabama, what, 3-4 years ago with Tua and Jalen Hurts. Tua goes down with an injury and Jalen Hurts comes in and leads them to a SEC championship. So I think the more the merrier when it comes to college football quarterbacks. So
And look, maybe this is just naivety on my part. Maybe it's one of those things where it's like, okay, you need you need a leader, you need an alpha, you need whatever. And if you're kind of funneling guys in and out, but Valpo's had success with multiple quarterbacks over the years. I think a lot of schools have had success. It's just,
Mhm.
to me, I in almost any sport at any level, if you go out there and you're having a bad day, you get benched and another guy comes in. And then it's just say, hey, you know what? It wasn't his day today. He made an
Mhm.
error at short. We took him out of the game. He didn't have good stuff on the mound. We took him out of the game. But the
Mhm.
second that you bench a quarterback, it becomes this referendum on whether or not he's the guy. And it's like, look, maybe that guy had a chemistry test on Thursday, was stayed up all night, and he just, he's struggling. Maybe he got broken up with that morning, right? Maybe it's just not his day. And so you put the other guy in. I don't understand in football at any level why it's got to be, and this is just a soapbox rant that you're
Mhm.
getting, so thanks for listening.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
don't
Go ahead.
understand why people have always got to make it like life or death, whether or not, you know what? If you throw a couple, like the game, Valpo had their quarterback threw 5 interceptions in the game. I'd have pulled him. They didn't, and he came back in and he let him down the field late in the game. But sometimes it's just not your day. Put the other guy in, and it doesn't mean that you're doing a culture shift or whatever. But we
Mhm.
live in this world now where it's like, oh, is it my team or not? Whatever.
Yeah, it's definitely a big question mark who's going to be under center for UNI as well. But I feel reasonably confident in all three guys that appear to be in that competition. That I'm not too terribly concerned about it. There's no panic level that I'm reading in Cedar Falls around that because I definitely think that the quarterback position can be a little bit overhyped at times, like you've mentioned.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Worst case scenario is the offensive line. They mimic bouncers at a college dive bar. They just let anybody in, and if that happens, if the quarterback is susceptible to getting sacked over and over because the offensive line is a sieve, that's a problem. So if Valpo can establish a run game and on the back end of the defense, if they're giving up big plays, that's worst case scenario. And look, Valpo's going to struggle to start the year because of the kind of the games they're playing, which we'll get into late in this podcast. But they're going to struggle to start the year. They've got to find a pair of wins in their first two home games to right the ship. And then you got some momentum going into conference, and that's what you hope. If you lose to Indiana Wesleyan or Roosevelt, now your confidence is shot before you even get to PFL, and you dovetail down, and that becomes the worst case scenario.
Does it raise your confidence level if I tell you that UNI is replacing all four of its defensive line starters? Does that seem like a little bit softer of a landing then?
No,
Okay,
there no, and again, we'll talk about my thoughts on this game toward the end, but
right,
but but you're going to replace all four defensive line starters with guys who are going to have probably 20 pounds and 3 inches on everybody on Valpo's front
all
line,
right.
and Valpo's got a good, well, I should say that Valpo's got a good defensive line. Valpo's offensive line is going to be that's going to be the litmus test for if they can be a good team or not, and this will be the first game playing together for a newly retooled offensive line. So, sure, I'm optimistic, Ethan.
All
I
right.
think yes,
All
yes,
right. You can always be optimistic in June and July, right?
yes, you can. Yes,
All
you can.
right. All right. So it sounds like the offensive line might satisfy might be the answer for the next question I had dialed up for you. But what are the biggest potential challenges maybe outside of the offensive line and what that shapes up to be?
Well, again, I think I want to take a 10,000-foot view on this in that one of the problems is that at a non-scholarship level program, getting size on either line, offensive, defensive line, it's just hard, right? I I mean no disrespect to Valpo football players or any non-scholarship football player when I say this. But if you're playing in the PFL, my experience is there's a reason you're there. There's a reason you're not at a scholarship program. I'll give you an example. And this is when we talk about the potential challenges.
Hmm.
Valpo's best quarterback, best player in the last 20 years. 20 years ago, they won a conference championship with a quarterback by the name of David Mackey. This guy had an arm like you wouldn't believe. He could make every single throw. Why was he at Valpo? Because he was like 5'9". He couldn't see over the offensive line. Now he made it work. He was agile. He rolled out. I mean, these passes were beautiful. If he's 3 inches taller, he's at a Pac-12 school. He's from Washington. He was from out west. He's at a Pac-12 school, and he's probably in the NFL. But he's not. Valpo's had some incredibly fast wide receivers over the years that drop the ball. Valpo's had amazing possession receivers that that can't get 10 yards down the field and like I can. Like in my 40-yard dash time, the clock breaks. They've had amazing big-bodied tight ends who can't catch, or they've had sleek tight ends who can't block, right? And that's not just Valpo. That is by and large, there's a reason you're not getting the scholarship. Now, that said, Valpo and all the other PFL schools make it work. They find guys. The problem is that they find guys, they give guys a shot, they bet on guys that then when they put it on tape, the scholarship programs come in like a UNI, like a Youngstown State, and they scoop up these players. And so the consistency becomes a problem. So that's a huge challenge. NIL efforts for football at Valpo are not a huge deal. I don't know what it's like at UNI, but basketball is where Valpo is focusing their resources. If you're a good player at a PFL school and you have a breakout season, unless you're the loyalist individual out there, chances are you're getting offers to go somewhere else. And so that becomes a bigger problem. So that's why it's been hard to keep offensive linemen. That's why it's been hard to build continuity at the linebacker position and things like that. So that's the biggest potential challenge that Valpo faces.
Going off that, let's talk about something a little bit more positive. Where's this team gonna when they're winning games? What's gonna be the number one reason why they're finding success?
Well, if I'm taking the same 10,000-foot view, I'll tell you this: Valpo has done a really good job of getting transfers from other schools that maybe took the bells and whistles offer, didn't get the playing time, and then said, you know what, I just want to play football. And they've had the last couple of years, not last year, but the 3 years before that, they've had all PFL running backs, like offensive player of the year in the league, Robert Washington, Aaron Dawson, guys that have gotten NFL tryouts, right? They've gotten linebackers from the Pac-12, Ben Hines, Kobe Fitzgerald. They got an all-conference Dubuque College All-American Division III. Tyler Guyman came in and was a stud last year. So they get these transfers that come in. They've got a few more coming in this year. Who they all are right now, I'm not necessarily certain. I've got a few names down, but they've done a really good job of getting guys in. And Landon Fox, Valpo's coach, is brilliant at getting these guys in and meshing them in with the returning talent. Some of the other strengths that they have a lot of pieces in the running back area. They've got 4 or 5 really solid running back options. I don't know that they have. Ryan Mann is probably the closest to a bell cow running back that they have, but they have a bunch of playmakers, guys that are fast but short, guys that are, that have really excellent hands out of the backfield. A Barrett Labus. You've got Jeffrey Vircher, who's a brilliant returner. You've got Brian Thomas, a true freshman last year running back out of Florida, who he could hula hoop through a Cheerio. He is a tiny guy, but he is quick. And so they've got a lot of different opportunities to get guys in space and make plays. And so that's a strength right there. And then their defensive line, they've got Hafner, they've got Kevin Spellman, they've got guys up front who have played a lot of football and they've come back and they're the leaders of this team. And so on the front line, they're good. They're going to be able to pressure the interior. They'll be able to get to the quarterback, disrupt things. Valpo's got a really solid defense and has under Landon Fox, who's a defensive-minded coach who came from Dayton.
Let's skip down a little bit since you mentioned the transfers being the potential biggest strength and that the ability to mesh them into the existing structure being the number one strength. What are some of those new faces, be it freshmen or transfers, that you think will have an impact in this next season?
Well, they got a couple of safety transfers. A kid by the name of Jalil Walker from Curry College, who was a hard hitter who got here in January. And one of the most impressive guys that I've had a chance to meet. From the moment I met him, I did a story on him in the spring, and I was like, this guy, I'm ready to strap it up. Give me a helmet. I'm ready to go. I like Jalil Walker a lot. They're bringing in a guy named Trey Ortega from Colorado, played. I mean, he was at Colorado last year with Sanders,
Mm-hmm.
and he is got all of the measurables on paper. He just wants to play football. And so he's going to come in. He just graduated from Colorado. I think he's got maybe 2 years of eligibility. He's just coming to play football. He wants to come in and just he didn't play a lot at Colorado. He did some
Mm-hmm.
special teams here and there, but here's a guy who's got the body for it, and I think he's going to be good. In terms of some freshmen, there's a bunch out there. Again, every freshman looks like they're going to be the greatest player in school history at this time. Kid named Noah Long put up video game numbers as a running back in Texas at 81 rushing touchdowns, thousands of rushing yards. I don't know how they keep everything's bigger in Texas,
Mm-hmm.
including the stats, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of local products here. A guy from Hobart High School here in the region named TJ Caldwell. And he's a fun dude. I've met him a couple times now because he's a local guy. Valpo's top receiver last year, a kid named Solomon Davis, transferred to Central Michigan. And this incoming freshman, I saw him at their spring football game, and he said to me, "Oh, I'm glad he's transferring because I'm coming to take that spot." I'm like, okay, Solomon is a 23-year-old fifth-year senior who led the team. You're an 18-year-old fresh, but hey, like that's the kind of confidence you need, you know.
Yep.
And then there's a linebacker or maybe defensive lineman. It could be both. Nick Johnson, a local kid from Highland High School, 150 plus tackles as a senior, hard hitter, feels like a guy who can come in and already be a leader. Just the way he carries himself, the little bit that I've gotten a chance to know him, whether or not he's going to have a huge impact game one, I don't know, but it's hard for freshmen. They're still they're young men playing grown men. But Caldwell, Johnson, Long, I expect those three. They got about 40 some odd guys coming in. I expect those three to be ones that I'll be looking after.
With all that we've talked about, where do you expect this Valpo program to be in terms of the Pioneer League? They finished second to last year, 2-6 conference record, 3-8 overall. What does the conference outlook look like for the Beacons?
I think in any cycle of football, you lose big, lose small, win big. That's the cycle that you go on. And Valpo has lost big under Landon Fox. They went 1-11 in his first year, and then they turned things around during that COVID stretch. They went 4-2 in the shortened COVID year. They've been losing small lately. They've been losing one score games. It's time to win small. It's time to flip, it's an evolution. And to me, I think the options you said were contender, sleeper, cellar dweller. I don't think they're going to win the league. I don't necessarily know that they're a sleeper to win the league,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think they're a cellar dweller either. I think this is a team that is going to go out there and be competitive in almost every game they play in the conference. They are going to have a tough time against some of the better teams because those teams have got bigger, stronger, faster players. That said, Valpo's not a cellar dweller. They're not a bottom feeder in this league, not
Mm-hmm.
with the talent that they have on this team. I expect this team to be competitive in every game they play in conference. And if the ball bounces the right way, I think Valpo is going to get more wins than losses in conference this year. And you start stacking success early, momentum can be a funny thing in football. And so
Mm-hmm.
I do think that Valpo, I wrote down sleeper. I'm not picking them to win the league. I'm probably not even picking them to be in the top half of the league, but nothing would surprise me.
So you're definitely picking etc. in those options.
Yes, yeah, there was etc. Sorry, there was
Middle of
etc.
the road, middle of the pack, tough out.
Yeah.
Uh, you've mentioned some of them in the course of the answering of other questions, but what are some of the big names that are going to be making plays in the UNI-Dome in August?
Well, obviously it starts with the quarterback, right? I mean, that's football. So Mikey Apple Jr. is a guy who had he came in last year. He struggled a bit. The numbers are going to say that he struggled. He had 5 interceptions against Indiana Wesleyan. I could point to 4 of them not being his fault. Tipped passes, weird tipped passes,
Mhm.
odd plays. One of them was a Hail Mary at the end of the half. It doesn't even really count.
Right.
And so that said, Mikey Apple Jr. or Rowan Keefe are the two quarterbacks. Keith, 60% completion rate, uh, good deep ball, still can throw some picks as well. And then Karan Tyler is another one who will come in, will have a package of plays. Running back wise, Ryan Mann ran for right around 500 yards last year. But again, they've got so many young guys that we'll look at. Receiver wise, Brandon Jimenez, a transfer from Albany last year, came in, had almost 20 catches for about 300 yards. Expect him to, he's been in town all summer. The guy has been working every day. I mean, if I've gone by the field, he's been out there. So Chris Gundy is another one, very, very fast, young, transfer last year. I like him a lot. Those will be the two top receivers. Evan Jernigan, I don't know where he's at coming back from a torn ACL, but he's a possession guy. He's a big touchdown maker. Just a big body that you don't really see in the PFL at tight end. I really like him. He's out of California. If he can get back from the ACL, and he's been moving well during summer, I think that's a big one. Defensively, Sam Hafner, Kevin Spellman on the defensive line. And then they got a boost with Austin Chilton coming back for a sixth year in the defensive backfield. Colin Graves, another one, kind of a tinier, undersized guy who is just a missile when he goes to hit somebody. So you like them. Linebacker, it's going to be tough. They lose Evan Annis, who is really the heartbeat of the team, leading tackler. They lose a couple of guys to transfer, Kamara, Abrams. So linebacker will be the big question, but there will be some players I think that will step up in that position, and we'll see kind of who they are. Looking at Jimmy Puba, Max Cobbs, is from Omaha, Nebraska. Should be some names to look out for there.
And then as you've kind of gone through spring camp, summer conditioning, when you've been talking with people from the football program, what's been their kind of prevailing message about this coming season, and maybe what their mantra is coming into 2024?
Well, the mantra around Valpo is always 3,600. It's how many seconds in a football game or something like that. I'm not even sure what it is. I think they all understand the program is set up now to finish the job, right? To finish games, to get to a point where you can take these close losses and turn them into close wins. I think there's a lot of optimism there. I think there's a lot of guys that are back. There's a lot of guys that are in town for the summer. Look, I mean, again, the theme, it starts and ends with the offensive line. If they can shore that up, they're going to be in great shape because they've got the playmakers to do it. They just need time for the plays to develop. The defense has always been strong. What does that look like when you're giving up 30 pounds and 3 inches at every position, which will happen in the first 2 games of the year? But I do think that this is a talented group, and I think there's some playmakers out there. If they can block for them and establish, they can win the line of scrimmage, be competitive at the line of scrimmage, I think Valpo is going to be in a lot of football games this year.
Real quick, we got 10 minutes left with you, Max. What are some games on the 2024 schedule that Valpo is going to be circling? Sounds like those two home games after their road games to UNI and Youngstown State sound like they're pretty big. What are those 2, 3 games that are going to make or break getting best case scenario or ending up in worst case scenario?
Yeah, I think Indiana Wesleyan is a good one right there, just because it'll be the first real game of the year, the first home game of the year. It's a night game. That's fun. Um, Valpo's a Division I team. Indiana Wesleyan's not. So you'd like to think, but they're a scholarship team. And
Hmm.
so there's a lot of similarities there. It's become a good rivalry as of late. Valpo won 2 years ago on a last second field goal in the season opener to beat them. This past year, again, it was a tough game at their place. It's become a really good rivalry, and I hope that it continues. So that'll be one that gets circled. November 9th, Saturday, Butler, the Hoosier helmet. It's always a huge game. It's the one that you circle every year. That's the rival right there. And then October 19th, home game against St. Thomas. You're going to see St. Thomas in week 2. Northern Iowa is. They're the pride of, I mean, them and Davidson
Hmm.
are the two teams that are really, really good here in the PFL, and Valpo gets both of them at home this year. So that's great after having to go to their places last year. San Diego's not on the schedule. They're traditionally have been very good. and it's always been fun to go out to California. But Valpo does get trips to Stetson, which is in Florida, and then Marist, which is in Poughkeepsie, New York, which is a fun one as well. But I would say Indiana Wesleyan, St. Thomas, Butler, Davidson, those games are all very big. If Valpo can go 2-0 against the in-state schools, you feel really good about it. If they can steal a win from St. Thomas or Davidson, it's going to be a good season.
Yeah, whenever people have asked me to kind of give the preview on the Panthers this year, when I've done a radio spot or just been chatting with somebody, I've kind of been cautious about talking about the St. Thomas game because they're non-scholarship, but they don't really feel like your average non-scholarship with the amount of money that athletics department is putting into, or that university is putting into its athletics department right now. So
Everything about that facility they have is 100% top notch, except for the friggin' press box. I
well,
felt like I needed a tetanus shot to go in that thing.
Well, that's a good
Everything
warning.
else,
Hopefully, because we're headed. UNI is headed on the road to St. Thomas too. So I'll be sure to update my shots before I go.
well, that'll be fall of 25. There's
That,
no chance that building stands in 2 years. The press box. It was and look, I'm a media member, so I like free media food,
right.
and so which means I'm a bigger guy. And in order to get to where I had to sit there, I had to like climb a ladder over a guy's laptop. It was tough. That said, everything else about St. Thomas was beautiful. And I had driven through the night from Valpo basketball, played at Illinois, drove through the night to St. Thomas. I don't remember much. I was so tired. But again, those facilities, you're right. A lot of money there. Just St. Thomas, Tommy's. Upgrade the press box a little bit, please.
Well,
Please.
UNI just announced their big Unidome renovation plan, and the press box was absent, missing in action from their upgrade plans. So
Indiana Wesleyan did not have room for the press in the press box, by the way.
that's interesting. I've been to the facility. I've been to the
It's
campus a
beautiful.
couple of times. This is a very nice facility.
Beautiful. There's just no room for the press in the press box. I
That
don't
that
know.
Yeah, that never makes sense when you show up and they've got no room for press in the press box could even be on the outside. It can say such and such press box, and then there's no room for the press. It's just statisticians, and then
I'm
sometimes
voting for whoever makes press boxes great again. That's who I'm voting for.
there you go. Um, and then to finish it out here today, give us you've kind of teased it a couple of times. Master the tease here. What is your prediction for how this game's going to go on August 31st?
Look, I want to be clear on this. I'd imagine Valpo's getting paid for this game. I think Valpo's getting paid for the Youngstown State game. Valpo opened last year against Youngstown State and lost 52-10. Northern Iowa beat Youngstown State last year 44-41. So you just do some extrapolation on what you think is going to happen. I want to say this though. Valpo will be ready for the game. 2 years ago, Valpo goes to Illinois State. They are 5 touchdown underdogs at Illinois State. And Valpo loses 28-21. They've got the ball with a chance to tie the game late. Valpo played so well against Illinois State that Illinois State immediately started recruiting Valpo's top quarterback and top wide receiver. They both now go to school at Illinois State. Like, what are we doing here?
Mhm.
So my prediction is Valpo plays hard against Northern Iowa, and Northern Iowa immediately starts tampering with Valpo's players.
All right, that's what I was gonna say. Maybe this was less a preview about the season opener, maybe more of a preview on who's going to be wearing the purple and gold in a couple of years.
No, look. This is what I've always said. Valpo likes to play these games, and I love that they do it. They do it for a couple of reasons. I think they get paid a little bit. I don't
Mhm.
know, it's private school, so I guess I could probably FOIA the contract on UNI's side of things.
Yeah.
But um, Landon Fox, I really appreciate his vision because Valpo's coach says these are the kind of teams we're going to play in the first round of the playoffs, and we expect to win the conference and get there. So let's get experience. So they're going to play Northern Iowa, they're going to play Youngstown State, and if they were to win the conference, that's the kind of team that they're going to have to play. And
Mhm.
so now they'll have 120 minutes of experience playing top flight teams. And how many guys at Valpo have ever played in a dome before? Probably very few.
Mhm.
I can't wait to go. I can't wait to be. I've never been there before. I mean, I've been to Northern Iowa. I've been to the basketball
Mhm.
facility. I've been outside the dome before, but I've never been in it. I can't wait. I think it's going to be awesome. I hope. I'd like to think there's room for the press in the press box.
There's ample seating for the press. There's usually a couple empty chairs even.
Very good.
Yeah.
No, I think it's going to be a challenge for Valpo. Um, I think the number one thing, and I know this is maybe like a tough mentality, but you got to get out of the game healthy. Going to Youngstown last year, Valpo lost their starting center to a ruptured bicep in the first game of the year.
Hmm.
It's brutal.
Hmm.
You're giving up weight and speed and height when you're playing these teams. It's gonna
Hmm.
be hard.
Hmm.
You wanna play the games. You got to come out of the games healthy as well. So that to me, success is a hard fought battle where you can learn something about yourselves and you come out of the game healthy. The wins or the losses in non-conference games really don't matter. If you can get some success on the field and the game, the result doesn't really matter. But if you can make a little bit of money on the side, sustain your program, that can be good. I think it's going to be a fun game. I can't wait to be there and win, loss, whatever. I hope everyone comes out of the game healthy.
All right, Zoom's going to kick us off in a minute and a half. So, real quick, where can people find your Valpo coverage in the lead up to that season opener?
Well, I run a site called thevictorybell.com. It's a subscription-based site, $5.99 a month or $59.99 for the whole year. Gets you all the coverage you need about all things Valpo, not just football, because also Valpo basketball plays in the same conference as you and I. You can find me on Twitter at TVB Oren. I'm very snarky. I don't take anything seriously on Twitter or X or whatever it is. I love the Green Bay Packers and I can't stand the Chicago Bears. And most of my tweets are a direct reflection of that. I'm also a big House of the Dragon guy right now. So you'll see tweets about that as well.
All right, thank you, Paul.